Square Bowls. I had done this demo, I don't know, 3 or 4 years ago, maybe 5 years ago. And Roger said he'd like to see it again, so I was glad to be able to put something together and be able to show you. What I have are some pieces that I've done. They're all basically the same shape, but I've done them with different sizes and different woods. So I'll pass those around first, and as I'm demoing, you can look at them. The piece of wood that I got, it was 2 inches thick, a little less than 2 inches thick, and it was about 2 inches longer than what this is. Then it was 110 bucks plus shipping. Gold wood is very, very expensive, but it really is nice. It turns about like walnut.
Where do you sell that?
And it's good wood to work with. And if you screw something up, it makes nice firewood. So.
It's very coarse too.
But anyway, this piece is, I forget, I think it's about 9. Yeah, this one's 9.5 inches square. What I have found is the easiest way to turn these, and they're pretty simple. You start with a screw chuck. I like using screw chucks because they hold well and they're just easy to use. Put the screw chuck hole on what you want to be the top side of the bowl, so that then you can turn the bottom side first, and then we're going to use a glue block on the bottom side to turn that around, put it in the chuck, and turn the bowl shape. Okay? So I'm going to mount this on the screw chuck.
Yeah.
Make sure this thing's in tight first. Good and tight. Typical screw chuck holes are 3/8 of an inch. I use an 11/32 to make it a little bit tighter fit. This cherry is a piece of greenwood cherry that's, I captured it last summer, I guess, so it's fairly dry. It's probably a little bit of moisture to it. I didn't measure it, but there's some moisture to it. Typical bowl gouge is all you need to start with. What we're going to do is shape this bowl just like you see those, where it's going to be thicker here and it's going to come up like this. So you have a nice continuous curve when you look down the bottom of the bowl. Right now this thing is all jaggy on the bottom. A word of it, if you've turned nothing but round pieces, round bowls, round whatevers, the natural inclination, at least for me was, and I'm sure it's for most people, is when you turn the lathe on or turn it off, sometimes you put your hand on the piece. Don't do that. All fleshy parts, your arm, your fingers, your hand, this side of the tool rest. Don't get them over here. Because all you got to do is make one contact with one of these corners coming around and you're going to get the nickname of Stubby, I believe me. It hurts. It really hurts. So be very, very conscious about the fact that your hands, your arms, everything need to be on this side of the tool rest. Also, wear a shield. you'll start to get some tear out on these two corners in the beginning. But as you remove some material and this slope starts to get a little steeper, that tear out will go away. So don't be too concerned about getting the tear out here. It'll usually be this corner and this corner.
Is there a reason for that?
It's just the way the grain's oriented, and it's just, you know, it's the straight grain's coming this way and it just comes off. Now, if you wanted to, you could protect this edge and this edge by gluing, you know, a thin strip of wood on here if you wanted to. But you don't really need to, because any little pieces of, or marks of tear out here, you can always sand them away anyway when we're done. So all I'm saying is don't be too concerned if it starts to happen. I like to keep my tool rest as close as I can to the piece. Another word of help, I'm always cutting with this first 25% of the gouge, right up in here. Matt?
Is there a difference for whether or not you're using a push cut, you're cutting into?
Yes.
What about using a pull cut pulling out?
You'll see me doing that too.
Okay, would you use it at this stage or not in line?
You can use it. In fact, I can do that now. Yeah, basically all I'm doing right now is just getting this piece of wood flat. Because right here you can see there's chainsaw marks in that much of the wood.
Okay.
Good question.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I stop the lathe quite often just to take a look and see what's happening, if there's anything weird happening as far as grain tear out or anything. This is a piece of cherry is working just beautiful. But I've still got chainsaw marks here, and I've got a little bit in the center there that I've got to clean up so that it's nice and smooth. Tool rest is up just a little bit high. What I have is a little hint. At home, with my tool rest, I have a stop collar that I put on all of my tool rests so that it's set for a 5/8 gouge height. If I've got a 1/2 inch gouge or a 3/8 gouge, then I've got to raise it up a little bit. But I know that when I drop that tool rest down there, drop it all the way down to that stop collar, it's at the right height. I don't ever have to adjust it.
You need
Just-
a tool rest adjustment.
Pardon? scraper and just scrape. This, by the way, is a Ray key scraper that I've kind of reconfigured just a little bit. When you buy these, the point is in the center so that you got both left and right that you can use. This one I've configured it so that I'm doing mostly left side because I like to do the inside of a bowl with it. But what I'm doing here is just getting this nice and flat because I'm going to put a glue block on it later. But what I want to do is put a registration mark there where the center is. Don't really need. Should have taken this out to begin with, so you don't get Woodturner's elbow. Glue block on this bottom side, and what I'm doing here is taking a compass to measure what the diameter is or what the radius is, and I'm just going to put a pencil line on here so that I know not to get inside of that. And we'll finish turning this. I don't understand why that's wobbling. For some reason that registration mark is wobbling on me and I don't like it. I don't know why that happened. Unless these centers aren't centered up. Okay, well, we'll just have to get around it. I like to raise this part up just a little bit. In other words, bringing the slope from about here up, so there's a little bit of a foot that this rests on, just like those pieces I passed around to you. There's like a little bit of foot. It raises it up off the table or wherever it's sitting to make it look a little taller, a little higher, like some of the things that Betty showed us yesterday.
Bob,
Yes,
how do you decide the diameter of that foot?
this foot,
Yeah.
basically, it's the size of whatever my glue block is, or it's going to be slightly a little bit bigger. It doesn't need to be very big. You know, I mean, you don't need it out here. So I'll make it, you know, it'll be about where this circle is, the pencil circle is. And these are about 2 to 2 1/8 of an inch, somewhere 2 1/4. I have some extras of these glue blocks too. If any of you want some or need some or haven't used them and would like to, I'll give them away to you. I think I brought about 4 or 5. that's whatever's comfortable for you. This is around 500. Sometimes I turn them a little faster, but now, one of the things you want to do is you don't want this curvature to go all the way up to the top here. So I try to leave about 3/8 of an inch thereabouts, or maybe a little less. So I put a little mark on there just to see, because these will come out evenly. So you just need to mark one to see where you are. Because when we turn this other side, you're going to do very little turning here, other than just a little bit. And most of your turning is going to be down in this part here to get a curve that is a continuous curve. So these very points here, once you've turned this bottom side, you really won't be turning much on there afterwards. Okay, I'm not quite to my pencil mark yet, but you could stop anywhere from here up to where my pencil mark is and it'd be just fine. It's just a matter of how tight you want it to look. This one is a fairly flat bowl. It's less than a 2-inch piece of wood that I started with, so it wouldn't hurt to, bring this up a little tighter. And this, I've got a high spot here, and I need to bring the foot up just a little bit. Now, I got a pretty good tear up right there. Again, don't worry about this, because what I do at this point, and I won't do it here because we don't do any sanding, I take my 5-inch orbital sander and I'll sand this. And you can sand, you'd be amazed how much of this you can sand out. It really disappears, because first of all, you don't want any sharp edges here. This we haven't worked on the front side, so we'll sand that later. But the bottom side here, any of these corners or any of these edges, you want to round them off. Just like when you do flat work. You don't want to have a sharp edge on a tabletop. First thing that hits it is going to put a nick in it. If you round them off a little bit, they're less likely to get damaged by bumping. And they feel better too. So at this point I would sand. After I do one thing, and that is from here to here I will scrape, just to get rid of some of these high spots and not have to do so much sanding. But you'd be surprised on these, you can get rid of a lot of this just by sanding. don't like going out here where the interrupted cut portion of the bowl is, because you can get a snag on there if you're not careful. The best thing to do is do these as best you can with the gouge. Don't scrape out here, and just rely on sanding to get this smooth. Yeah?
Do you sand with the piece moving or?
No, stationary. You don't want to sand with this turning, because you're going to get something grabbing onto here, and it'll be a mess. Always sand these stationary, but that's a good question.
What do you sand with? Like
Start with 80 and an orbital. I have like a DeWalt orbital sander, 5-inch orbital sander, disc sander. Start with 80, 120, 180, 220. 220 is about as far as I go. Okay. So now we've got the bottom fairly well secured. I like using glue blocks. I use them all the time. Don't be afraid of them. The only thing you need to be afraid of when you're using glue blocks is if your CA glue has gotten old. Once the CA glue is about a year old or more, it tends to lose its strength. It also loses its reaction time with the accelerator. I made that mistake. I got some at the last the AAW symposium I went to in Minneapolis, and the guy had a 2-for-1 special, so I thought, oh shoot, I'm going to save a lot of money here. And so I got 2 16-ounce jars of the thick or the medium thick, and 2 16-ounce of the medium thick or the thin, and it was way too much. And I wound up throwing one of the thin and one of the thick away, because they got so old. It was like a year and a half old, and the stuff just wasn't holding. So don't use old CA glue. Now, some people say you can store this in a refrigerator. I wouldn't store it in a refrigerator that I was had food in. So if I stored this in a refrigerator, I would store it inside of another container, like 2 containers. Because this stuff is a little bit wicked. What I do with the CA, some people I have these glue blocks configured in such a way so that this part here is concave, so that the only part that's touching the bottom of the bowl is this, about 3/8 of an inch on the outside here. I don't coat that entire area. You can if you want to. It doesn't hurt anything, but you really don't need to. And I'm using the medium thick, and all I do is put about a fingernail size area on 4 places. Spray that with some accelerator. Use tailstock to bring that up so it can wind out. And just put a minimal amount of pressure on it. Doesn't need to be much. Now, the other thing you want to do is you're going to get some squeeze out. You can see right here, I got a little bit of squeeze out. Make sure you put some accelerator on that, because if you don't, you're going to wind up with your face shield splattered with CA glue, and even worse if you got it in your eye. So always make sure you do the outside just a little bit so that isn't wet. Need to let this sit just a little bit. Anybody have any questions about what we've done so far?
You know, Bob, I know a number of people are a little leery of glue blocks. Have you ever had something come off?
Yeah, I've had a couple.
Yeah.
It's no big deal.
It really isn't. If it's done properly, it shouldn't.
Yeah, I know why. The couple that I've had come off is when my glue was getting old.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Now, some people have used the hot glue.
Hot glue works too. I don't trust it as much. But it does work. I've used hot glue and it works just fine. Some people use like regular PVA glue too. The problem with that is you got to let it sit overnight or even longer to make sure it's good and dry. Tight bond is PVA.
Do you make sure you use light cuts?
Pardon?
Do you make sure you never take a heavy cut?
On these?
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, you don't want to take you don't want to be trying to hog this off in like 2 minutes. That's why I was taking some time. Because you've got exposed edges here and you've got an interrupted cut from here out, this part. It starts to get...
For the glue block too, right?
Oh, with the glue block. No, you can take some heavy cuts with the glue block. Really, it's not too bad. They hold. All right, we'll give this a try, see what happens.
Would you before you take that off, would you true up that blue block first?
Well, you're a good straight man, Matt. Because that is a good idea. And I think we've got a problem here with centers on something.
It is,
Because it's off. And the way you can do that...
That's a lesson I learned the hard way, Chris.
Yeah, you're right. Set your tool rest as tight in as you can. Yes. And this is a detail gouge that I can easily do a tenon with. Typically I do a tenon. See how much that's off? And then there's something not right with the way the centers are matching up because I was right on the line that I had made. I don't think I've ever had one that far off. Thanks, Matt, you saved me on that one. I owe you.
I'm sure I owe you for stuff.
Nah, I don't.
worry about it.
Now. Oh.
yeah, that center old wobbling all over.
Yeah. Take out the screw chuck.
You think the line center is out of adjustment with the headstock?
Yeah,
Not equal?
not equal. I don't think, anyway. I don't know why else, I've never had one flop around where the line flops around like that did. We can take a look at it later after we're done. Now what we're going to do is do the bowl on the top. What I like to do is leave on this edge here about maybe an inch. So what I'll do is just draw kind of a flimsy pencil line. And then I'm going to draw a second line just about less than 1/4 of an inch in from there. That gives me the raised rim that was on those pieces. That'll be the raised rim part. The raised rim gives a lot of depth to the bowl. You could just turn this flat and turn a bowl if you wanted to, but if you by raising the rim a little bit, it gives you a whole different concept of what the bowl looks like. Once again, bowl gouge. What I used to do when I first started doing these. At this point, I have a half-inch drill with a Morse taper that I would just throw it in my tailstock and bring it up and mark on here about 1.5 inches or so depth and drill a depth hole in the center. Because this screw chuck hole is only about 3/4 of an inch long, so it's not a good depth hole. But you can also just eyeball it too, it doesn't matter.
It's because you were jibber jabbering when you should have paid attention. When you get out close to this first line, the face of this is not quite even. So I'm getting a little bit of a skip cut where I'm not cutting much here, but I'm cutting a lot here. What you want to be careful of so you don't get a backward skate is just to be very careful when you approach that line to get yourself evened out, and then you can start, digging in with removing, just so you don't skate over the line.
When you even it first?
Pardon?
When you even the face first before you put your legs?
You could. I don't. It just saves time. But you could do that. Notice, once again, instead of doing the overhand cut, I'm doing underhand. Keep your arm on this side of the tool rest. Make sure you get a nice hemispherical shape. This could go a little steeper here, but I'm not going to mess with it because it's really not too bad. I still have to finish the bottom. What I have switched to the last couple of years is I got a bottom finishing gouge from Doug Thompson. If you can see the cut on this. This has a double bevel, whereas the lower bevel is a little more slanted. The bevel up by the flute is flatter.
these are great for this last 20% or so of bottom finishing on a bowl.
How difficult is that to sharpen though?
Not hard.
Okay.
Not hard at all. And the nice thing is you're only using it here for a little bit, so you don't have to sharpen it nearly as much as you do your
Right.
regular standard bowl gouge. But these are easy to sharpen. I just sharpen it by eye. Tool rest is a little bit high. That's not bad. I've got a few ridges right in here, and what I'll do, take my trusty scraper, a little bit of a nib right there. That will come off with sanding. This feels pretty good. You know your scraper's sharp if you can come off with shavings like that. That's the way it should be. All right, now we've got to do outside the line and the raised rim. Now you can see I'm starting to get a curve here, but I'm flat out here where the corners are. So I haven't really cut much on that last half inch or so of the corner. So I got to work on that just a little bit. This also is coming up here, so I've got to get a little deeper. Once you make full contact without not having abbreviated cut, it wants to push the gouge away from the wood when you're into a solid cut. So just remember that. It'll always start to come up a little bit on you. So you have to change the angle of the cutting tip just a little bit. if you noticed, I was kind of looking this way. I've got the light angled in such a way that I get a little bit of a shadow, and I can tell when I'm just about ready to make contact with these corners because they don't really show up very much. And you can see there's a lot of lines on there. You know, that's not exactly smooth. But this will come out very easily with sanding. Don't worry about it. And I don't mean a lot of sanding either, because I don't like the sand. What I'm going to do next is I'm going to switch to my 3/8 fingernail gouge and finish this raised part here. I don't like to use the bigger gouge because it's too big. Now you've got the raised rim. This needs to be a little bit smoother. I can do better than that. But I don't want to use the scraper.
Would you ever want a shear scrape on something like that?
The problem is, the question was, would I ever want a shear scrape? You can, but you've got to have very good tool control and don't get the yips where you might, push in. Because when you're out here making an abbreviated cut, you can get a snag that just scare the hell out of you sometimes. So I don't like to do too much out there like that. But you could do it. You could do a shear scrape, yeah. But this little bit that's left here, that come off in 2 minutes of sanding with 80 or 120 grit. Not a big deal.
You were using your hand on top of the tool just now, as opposed to underneath, like you said.
Here,
Is there a reason?
it's just habitual. I typically do cut this way when I'm doing just regular bowls and whatever. For this work, I should have had it underneath because it's kind of detail work and it's up close. And I'm not really taking a lot of wood. The main thing is just make sure you're comfortable with keeping your hands on this side of the tool rest. I can't accentuate that enough. Okay, basically we're done. What I will do is leave this here. We can put it in the raffle, and if somebody wants to, they can finish it. I will leave the glue block on. I brought another bowl to show you how I take the glue blocks off and what you get. But this is basically a finished piece. All you got to do is a little sanding. That's really all you need to do. This is my poor man's chuck. I think most of you have seen these. This is just Schedule 40 PVC pipe, 3-inch to 2-inch reducer with some clear vinyl tubing that I've stuck on the outside to give it a soft face to it. Makes a great chuck. Let's see. Yeah, what I need to do, we'll finish the bottom of this one. And what I'll do is very simple, take these off. Everybody see this? All you need, this is an old broken down chisel. It's got the handle knocked off. Orient the grain up and down. I just wedge a chisel in there. you got a nice clean cut. And I still have a registration mark that I can put this on here and finish the bottom. But all it takes is just a blow with a chisel. I don't have a vacuum chuck. This is what I use in lieu of a vacuum chuck. What's that?
Since you got good ears.
Yeah, we should have the club's vacuum chuck up here for you.
Oh, that's okay. Whoops. What did I do? That chisel was sharp. So sharp I didn't even know it.
Band-Aid.
Okay, this is the way I finish the bottoms of mine. Whoops. As soon as I tighten that up. Tends to make a little noise sometimes. Yeah, these are not lined up when that's happening. That's all there is to finishing the bottoms. A little sandpaper. I put a little decoration in there sometimes. 2 little grooves with a 3-point tool. Anybody got a Band-Aid?
Yeah, we're getting one.
He's getting one for you.
Yeah.
Don't mean to bleed all over it.
Yeah,
Ridiculous.
there goes one.
We're gonna do it.
It's always super good.
It's super glue.
There's always super glue. My brother-in-law's a doctor, and he says you'd be surprised how many times super glue is used. It's great stuff, especially on the battlefield.
I can't get that clear. Must be rolled.
There you go.
Yeah, good thing I'm not an ER doctor.
Okay, now we're set. That's what I get for using a chisel without a good handle on it. Anyway,
You could make a handle.
I could also buy another chisel. Anyway, what you have left, you can sand this, is a little nub here. And what I do is I put my Jacob's chuck in the number 2 with a number 2 Forstner or number 2 Morse taper on it, and put it in here along with the small grinding disc, and just hold it up there and grind this off. And then I have a 2-inch sanding pad that I put in it too. And then that sands it. And that's basically an easy way to finish either bowl bottoms or any kind of a bottom on a piece. If you don't have a vacuum chuck.
I gave you a vacuum chuck.
I know, I don't have it hooked up.
Where's the club's vacuum
You'll
chuck?
fall in love with that. When you get it hooked up, you will just think, why didn't I do this?
I know, I've used lasers with vacuum chucks and I love them. Okay, that is the end of the one show. And see what you think. I talked to Roger about this earlier.
Oh, yeah.
These are some square bowls.
That's a done deal.
Yeah.
I'm going to practice a little more because I haven't done too many of these, but I offered to Roger that next year, fall, winter, whenever, we could do a demo showing how to do these. There's a guy down in North Carolina that's very good at these called Mark Gardner, and I know we tried to get him up here. If you can get him up here, please do, because he's wonderful. But anyway, what these are is you wind up with bowls like this. So you've got turning this way, and you got turning this way.
So I'll pass these around too, just to look at, but
Would it ever